My girlfriend is one of the most powerful women in New York City, and she's in love with another man. I pretended not to notice. Everyone laughed at me. The doormat, the lapdog, the pathetic sycophant. What they didn't know was that I'm not from this world at all. I'd bound myself to a system. If I could complete 100 tasks for my CEO girlfriend, Isabel Vance, I could return to my own world. I'd endured her cold shoulder for 5 years and had just finished the 99th task. Ring. The shrill sound of my phone shattered the quiet of the dark room. The caller ID made my heart clench. I answered immediately. Ethan, get over here now. Something's happened with Isabel. She killed someone. The frantic voice on the other end belonged to Isabel's best friend. She didn't elaborate, just choked out the address before hanging up. It was the dead of a winter night. The wind howled, driving a blizzard of thick, wet snow. I didn't even have time to grab an umbrella, just plunged out the door in my slippers and pajamas and into the storm. When I arrived at the penthouse, a small crowd had already gathered in the living room. On the floor lay a woman, her face ashen, utterly lifeless. The moment I appeared, every eye in the room swiveled to me. You're finally here, one of them said. You have to figure something out. Izzy was drunk. She lost control and killed this woman. The Vance family might be royalty in this city, but even they can't just ignore a murder charge. Ethan, another voice chimed in, since you love Izzy so much, why don't you take the fall for her? Go to prison in her place. So that was it. They wanted a scapegoat. I scanned their faces, then nodded without a moment's hesitation. Fine, I'll do it. They didn't know the truth. I wasn't from this world. I wasn't the lovesick fool they all despised. 5 years ago, I was supposed to marry Anna Hayes, my childhood sweetheart, another orphan like me. But a sudden car crash had turned our future into a tragedy, tearing us apart forever. In the depths of my grief, I had inexplicably bound myself to a system that promised to bring her back to life if I completed 100 tasks. So I came here, to this world, to become the infamous lapdog of Isabel Vance, the heiress to a New York real estate empire. After 5 years, I had completed 99 tasks. Only one remained, taking the blame for a murder. To get Anna back, I wouldn't hesitate to die. Hearing my answer, the onlookers stared, stunned by my swift agreement. A moment later, the room erupted in laughter. As they parted, Isabel Vance emerged from another room. Even the dead woman on the floor promptly sat up and dusted herself off. See, Izzy? We were right, someone crowed. He didn't even blink at the idea of going to jail for you. We should just crown him the king of simps. Go on, give him the papers. He'll sign anything for you. Staring at the beautiful, stone-faced woman before me, I finally realized I'd been played. Again, Isabel's expression was blank. She walked over and held out a file. I'm asking you to do this for me. I opened it. At the top of the first page, in bold, black letters, were the words, Voluntary Heart Donation Agreement. I looked up, my eyes meeting Isabel's cold gaze. You know, Julian has an aggressive cardiomyopathy, she said, her voice flat. He needs a transplant. You're the only match in the entire city. And don't worry, you won't die. I've already commissioned a state-of-the-art artificial heart for you from Swiss Lab. It will allow you to live a relatively normal life. She paused, her eyes like chips of ice. Ethan, if you agree to donate your heart to Julian, I'll marry you. I had always known Isabel was deeply in love with Julian Croft. I just never realized how deep it ran. For him, she was willing to marry a man she felt nothing for. As the heir to the Vance Corporation, Isabel had been raised with a strict, almost militaristic upbringing. The kindness Julian showed her in their youth had forged an unbreakable bond in her heart. But Julian had only ever seen her as a sister. Just as she was about to confess her feelings, he left the country with another woman. For the next 5 years, Isabel waited, her devotion unwavering. When she learned he was sick and had been abandoned by his girlfriend, she flew overseas without a second thought, brought him back, and took care of him. She had turned the city upside down, searching for a compatible heart. I just never imagined she would come to me. Seeing my silence, Isabel started to speak again, but I cut her off. I looked straight at her, my eyes, which she'd always found unnervingly intense, now filled with a strange, smiling light. Okay, I'll donate. My voice was low and steady, as if I were agreeing to pass the salt. Isabel's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of surprise in her expression. You really agree? Donating your heart wasn't a joke. How could he accept so readily? My face remained a calm mask. I'd do anything for you, even die, donating my heart to the man she loved. This was my 100th task. The system had just confirmed it. This was the final mission, complete the heart transplant surgery. Once it was done, my true love would be resurrected, and I could finally leave this world. Seeing the genuine anticipation on my face, Even the perpetually cold Isabel Vance felt her throat tighten. But before she could say another word, I took the pen and signed my name with a firm, steady hand. She seemed dazed. Then, as if to reassure me, or perhaps herself, she added, "The surgery is in 10 days. I'll make all the arrangements. It won't be too painful." I smiled and nodded, a wave of relief washing over me. Just 10 more days, and I would finally be free. With everything settled, I knew Isabel didn't want me around. I turned to leave, but after a few steps, the world went black, and my body pitched backward. Isabel moved with surprising speed, catching me before I hit the floor. It was only then that she seemed to notice my clothes were soaked through with melted snow. My fingers were like ice, and I was still wearing a pair of flimsy slippers. In my haste, I'd forgotten to even change my shoes. The onlookers saw my state and snickered. A true warrior, charging into the storm for love. What's a little hypothermia to a guy like him? Anything to get on Izzy's good side. And I guess it worked. "Izzy, just leave him with the staff. Don't bother." Isabel looked down at the man leaning against her, his face pale as paper. A heavy weight settled in her chest, making it hard to breathe. Then, in a move that shocked everyone, including herself, she draped my arm over her shoulder and started walking me toward the door. Glancing at the stunned faces around her, she said coolly, "For the sake of his heart, I can't let anything happen to him for the next 10 days. With that, she guided me out of the apartment. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I finally surfaced, it was to the vague sensation of someone holding me, gently tipping water into my mouth. The touch was so soft, just like Anna's. Only she would ever treat me with such tenderness. For 5 years, my longing for her had been a constant, driving madness. Every night, I prayed to be with her again. For a moment, I thought this was another dream. But the warmth of the hand holding mine felt so real. I gripped it tightly, my voice raw and urgent. "Anna!" A sharp pain shot through my wrist, jolting me fully awake. I opened my eyes. Sitting in front of me was not Anna, but Isabel, her expression icy and tinged with anger. Her brows were knitted together. "Whose name did you just say?" I bit my lip, glancing around the unfamiliar, opulent bedroom. I quickly changed the subject. "Is this your place?" The displeasure on her face didn't fade. "After the surgery, we're getting married. You're my boyfriend, in name at least. Is there a problem with you staying here?" She leaned closer. "Whose name were you calling out?" Isabel was never one to press for details. She'd never shown the slightest interest in my life before. But for some reason, tonight she wouldn't let it go. Seeing no way out, I averted my gaze, feigning embarrassment. "Yours, of course. Who else would I be calling for?" Isabel didn't press further, apparently accepting the explanation. It made sense. My devotion to her was infamous throughout New York. Whose name would I call but hers? Perhaps she was just tired and had misheard. She stood and tossed a set of clothes onto the bed. "If you're fine, get dressed. We're going to the hospital." I didn't ask why. When we arrived, I understood. Isabel had already arranged a full battery of physical exams. All of it was to ensure that the heart inside my chest was in perfect condition to be transplanted into Julian Croft. Watching the sharp needle slide into my vein, seeing my blood flow through the clear tube, I remembered how I used to be terrified of needles. Anna would always hold me, cover my eyes, and whisper comforting words. But now, she was gone, and she would never speak again. A doctor was rattling off a list of precautions, but I was lost in memory, not hearing a word he said. It was only his last sentence that broke through the fog, that with an artificial heart, I would be little more than a living dead man. A living dead man? So what? A vegetable, or even actually dead? What did it matter? Without Anna, I had no reason to keep living anyway. Besides, I didn't belong here. After I completed this last task for Isabel, I would be leaving this world for good. My body would die, but my soul would return. This surgery was just a formality on my way out. Seeing my distracted state, Isabel's gaze turned sharp. "What? Are you having second thoughts?" I just shook my head slowly. "I told you. I'll do anything you ask." Our eyes met. As she looked into what she had always perceived as my adoring gaze, Isabel felt, for the first time, a flutter of unease. She quickly looked away, muttering an excuse about making a call before turning and leaving the room. I sat there, listening silently to the rest of the doctor's instructions. I don't know how long passed, but Isabel didn't return. I left the exam room on my own. The moment I stepped out, I saw him, Julian Croft, who had apparently just finished his own checkup. It was the first time we'd met in person, though we'd both seen countless photos of each other. Isabel's home was a shrine to him. There were photo albums filling an entire cabinet, enough pictures to cover walls, chronicling his life from childhood to the present. He was just as handsome as in the pictures, though his complexion was pale, making him look like a delicate porcelain doll in a shop window. This was the allure of the one that got away, the one even the formidable Isabel Vance could never forget. I wanted no trouble with him. I gave him a brief glance and turned to leave. But he called out to me, "Mr. Grant, I'm so sorry. If it weren't for me, Izzy wouldn't be forcing you to donate your heart." He feigned a pained expression. "I know. Transplanting an artificial heart will be incredibly difficult." Before he could finish, I cut him off. "You don't have to say anything. I'm doing this in my own free will. Only by doing this would my final task be complete. Only then could Anna live again." But perhaps my calmness wasn't the reaction he wanted. Annoyance flickered across his face before it was replaced by a smug, knowing smirk. "I know what Izzy promised you," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But I'm afraid you're not going to get what you want." I didn't understand what he meant by that. Before I could process it, he was walking toward me. Faster than I could react, Julian grabbed my arm and, using my own hand, slapped himself across the face. The crisp sounds echoed in the quiet hallway. By the time I realized what was happening, he had already used my hand to strike himself several times. I yanked my arm back. At that exact moment, Julian began to wail, his voice loud and apologetic. "It's all my fault. It's because of my illness. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to donate your heart, Mr. Grant. If you're angry, just hit me. It's okay." Before I could even open my mouth to argue, a blur of motion came from my side. A figure shoved me violently. The force was so strong that my already weak body stumbled backward, slamming into the wall. I felt my head crack against something hard, and a warm liquid began to trickle down my face. The coppery smell of blood filled my nose, and my vision blurred into a sea of red. My head felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The world was spinning. Just as I was about to collapse, my hand found the wall, barely managing to keep me upright. Through the haze, I saw that the person who had pushed me was Isabel. She never even glanced at me. Her face was full of gentle concern as she cradled Julian. "Are you okay? Does it hurt? Should we get a doctor?" Julian, nestled in her arms, was now sobbing like a heartbroken child. "It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Mr. Grant has every right to be upset about giving me his heart. Izzy, please don't blame him." Isabel stroked his face tenderly, then whipped her head around to glare at me. Her expression was now glacial. "If you don't want to donate, then don't. No one is forcing you. You have a problem, you take it up with me. What do you think you're doing, taking it out on Julian? Are you even a man?" She didn't give me a chance to explain before turning back to him, her voice softening instantly, the contrast with her tone to me jarring. "How many times did he hit you?" Julian looked up, his eyes wide and innocent, his lip trembling. "3, he whispered. Then he quickly grabbed her hand. "I'm okay, Izzy, really? Let's just drop it." Isabel stroked his hair, then shot a cold look at the bodyguard standing nearby. 10 times what he gave you." My vision was suddenly blocked by the towering figures of several men in black suits. Through the gaps between them, I saw Isabel lead Julian away, handling him as carefully as if he were a precious antique. Then, hands grabbed me. These men didn't care that I was weak or injured. They only cared about following their boss's orders. Heavy, stinging slaps rained down on my face. The pain was sharp and fiery, until finally my cheeks went numb. I knew my face was swelling, and I could taste blood in my mouth. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for it to end, my mind desperately conjuring Anna's image. If she were here, she would protect me. Wouldn't she? After what felt like an eternity, it was over. The bodyguards dragged me back to Isabel's penthouse. For the next few days, I was confined to my room, forbidden to leave, Isabel's punishment, I assumed. She never came back. 3 days later, I saw her on the news. Shocker. New York heiress showers beau with millions. Isabel Vance, CEO of the Vance Corporation, is sparing no expense to win the heart of Julian Croft. Luxury cars, designer watches, a private yacht. Sources say the gifts are endless. The story had blown up across the city, and the internet was buzzing with envious comments. I glanced at it for a moment before turning off the TV, feeling nothing. What did any of this have to do with me? In 2 more days, it would be Julian's birthday. My confinement was lifted, and Isabel's assistant delivered a tailored suit. I was instructed that my attendance at Julian's birthday party was mandatory, and that I was to formally apologize to him there. I didn't want to go, but it wasn't a negotiation. Fine. I'd treat it as a spectacle. I changed into the suit. Looking in the mirror, I could see the swelling on my cheeks hadn't fully faded. I took the ointment they'd provided and dabbed it on carelessly. It's almost over. The mission will be complete soon. I repeated it to myself like a mantra, the only thought that brought me any comfort. Soon, I arrived at the party. It was on a yacht, the one Isabel had bought him. Every detail I'd heard was designed by her personally. Flowers, chocolates, fireworks, every cliché symbol of romance was on full display. I had no interest in any of it and just waited for the party to begin. Before long, amid cheers and applause, Isabel appeared, a goddess in the eyes of nearly every man there. Tonight, her gift to Julian was a bracelet called the Starfall. It was rumored to be a vintage piece from a European collection, costing her nearly $10 million. With everyone watching, she personally fastened the exquisite gift onto Julian's wrist. A chorus of congratulations erupted from the crowd. Ms. Vance and Mr. Croft are such a perfect match. Indeed, a gift that valuable. Only someone of Ms. Vance's stature could afford such a gesture. I stood in a quiet corner, watching it all with a placid expression. I was an outsider here, unable to blend in with the glittering crowd, my mind only calculating the few days left until I could leave this world. I didn't want any more trouble. At this stage, it was best to stay far away from Julian Croft. I thought the day would pass without incident. But then, ignoring the crowd, Julian started walking directly toward me. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I instinctively turned to leave, but he was faster, grabbing my arm. With his back to the lights and the rest of the party, Julian's voice was a cold whisper only I could hear. Looks like last time wasn't enough for you. You actually dare to show up again. This time, I'll make you understand the difference between us. Before I could react, he did something astonishing. He ripped the bracelet Isabel had just given him from his own wrist and, without a flicker of hesitation, threw it into the dark water of the Hudson. The next second, his face was a mask of shock. He shoved me back frantically. Mr. Grant, are you insane? How could you throw the bracelet Izzy gave me into the river? His shout immediately drew the attention of everyone nearby. Isabel rushed over, her brow furrowed, pulling Julian protectively behind her. Did he bully you again? I almost laughed. I knew that despite how flimsy Julian's lie was, when it came to Isabel, I was the one who would pay. And right on cue, Julian was already back in her arms, starting his tearful performance. Izzy, Mr. Grant just said he wanted to see the gift you gave me, but then he just snatched it and threw it into the water. Hearing this, Isabel's gaze locked onto me, so sharp it could kill. What did I tell you? And what did you do? She then turned back to comfort Julian. It's okay if it's gone, it's gone. I'll just buy you another one. But at her words, Julian became hysterical. He pushed her away and made a move toward the railing. That one was special to me. I only want that one. Isabel panicked, grabbing him and pulling him back in her arms. You have to have that one. Julian didn't speak, just nodded forcefully. Isabel's gaze returned to me, her voice devoid of any emotion. Whoever threw it in can go get it back. The next second, before I could even process her words, she shoved me hard, sending me tumbling over the railing and into the black water below. The icy water engulfed me instantly. Salty, polluted liquid flooded my lungs. I instinctively tried to shout, "Help!" but the sound was swallowed by the river. The world above became a blurry, distant light as my body grew heavier, sinking into the dark. I can't die yet. I have to bring Anna back. Fueled by a desperate surge of strength from some unknown reserve, I finally broke the surface. I gasped for air, paddling frantically toward the yacht. When I finally clawed my way back onto the swimming platform, my chest burned and I coughed violently, spitting up water. I was a pathetic sight, a circus clown for the entertainment of the well-dressed guests watching from the deck above. I could see the cold smiles on their faces. My life meant nothing to them. But before I could even catch my breath, a dark figure loomed over me and a heavy boot pushed me back into the water. Ms. Vance said you can come out when you find the bracelet. A gruff voice growled from above. I choked on more water before I managed to steady myself. I knew then that there was no way out of this. If I didn't find that bracelet, they would let me drown. Resigned, I used what little strength I had left and began to dive, again and again, into the murky depths. I don't know how long it took. An hour, maybe two. My body was at its absolute limit when my fingers finally closed around the thin, metallic chain of the bracelet Julian had thrown away. Once I was back on the deck, my entire body was numb. My hands and feet were bone cold, the skin pale and wrinkled from the prolonged immersion. One of Isabel's bodyguards tossed a dry set of clothes at me. I took them and, dragging my exhausted body, stumbled toward the restroom. As I was changing, I heard voices outside the stall. Someone had come in. I paid it no mind until I recognized the familiar tone. It was Julian and his friends. Damn, Doom is. Vance is something else. Dropping that kind of cash on a gift just like that. You've probably made a couple million off her in the last few weeks alone. Julian, I gotta say, that whole thing with your ex, wasn't that a bit much? Even a heart of stone should have melted by now, man. You gonna give her a break? Yeah, seriously. The woman is rich and completely lovesick. Don't tell me you're really just going to keep calling her your sister. Julian just chuckled, his voice laced with smug satisfaction. You guys don't actually think I see her as a sister, do you? He paused for effect. Let me teach you something. People always want what they can't have. It's the most precious thing in the world to them. Otherwise, why would she be so completely devoted to me? Let's be honest, he continued, his voice dripping with condescension. Keeping things like this is way more fun than actually being with her. A woman that emotionally starved is pathetically easy to control. His friends were stunned into silence for a moment, then burst out laughing. Jesus, Julian, you're a master at this. But what's the point? It's like having a priceless vase you can only look at, not touch. You idiot. He is treating her like a vase. No, better, a personal ATM. Ha ha ha. Still, I heard Vance promise to marry that simp if he donated his heart. Julian's confidence didn't waver. Don't worry, I won't let that happen. And as for that simp, I don't even think about him. His tone turned boastful. Earlier, I slapped myself 3 times, and what did Izzy do? Made her guys hit him 30 times without even asking a question. A few minutes ago, I tossed that bracelet in the river, and you all saw what happened to him. If I want to mess with him, I've got 100 different ways. Another round of boisterous laughter followed, their voices fading as they walked away. Anyway, forget all that. You guys see those girls at the party tonight? I already got their numbers. We're all heading to a hotel after this. You in, Julian? Of course. Once the restroom was silent again, I stepped out of the stall and stopped the recording on my phone. I always knew Julian was a piece of work, but the power of a long-lost love was a formidable thing. I put my phone away and shook my head slightly. This recording would be my farewell gift to Isabel Vance. It was after midnight by the time I got back to Isabel's penthouse. Dragging my exhausted body through the massive front door, I saw her immediately, sitting on the sofa, her expression as cold as ever. She stared at me, and as I walked in, her brow seemed to furrow even deeper. Why did you go after Julian again? She was just here to interrogate me. I instinctively wanted to explain, to pull out the recording, but I stopped myself. I knew that in this moment, Isabel wouldn't believe a word I said. Only the dead don't lie. I looked up and offered a simple, familiar excuse. Because I'm jealous of him. Because I love you. Without another glance at her, I walked past and went to my room. The next day, I woke up early. It was a special day. It was my Anna's birthday. By chance, Isabel was out, which was perfect. In the past, Anna and I would celebrate together, just the two of us. Now I was alone. A pang of sadness hit me, but I pushed it away and got to work. I prepared a huge meal, a table full of all her favorite dishes. I baked a cake from scratch and arranged fresh flowers. I carefully placed candles on the cake, but just as I was about to light them, the front door swung open. Isabel was back, unexpectedly. We stood there, staring at each other. As I scrambled for an explanation, her voice, tinged with surprise, broke the silence. How did you know it was my birthday? I was speechless. Isabel, deprived of parental affection since childhood, had never celebrated her birthday. She didn't even care about it herself. Information about it was a closely guarded secret. Not even Julian knew. I knew, of course, because the system had provided me with all of her data. But Isabel had never mentioned it, and in the chaos of my mission, I'd completely forgotten. Now it hit me. She and Anna shared the same birthday. Isabel looked at the beautifully set table, the cake, the flowers. A flicker of something unreadable moved across her face, a subtle shift in the icy mask she always wore. Though I hadn't answered, she took my silence as confirmation. Just then, the housekeeper, Maria, came in from the kitchen. Ms. Vance, mister. Grant was busy all morning preparing this for you. I think he even burned himself a little, all to give you this surprise. I had been in and out of this penthouse for years, and Maria was the only long-term staff member. I often helped her with small tasks, and we had developed a friendly rapport. She usually took my side. Isabel seemed momentarily lost in thought. After a moment, her expression hardened back to its usual coldness. She looked at me and said, "Don't do this again." Despite her words, she sat down at the table and accepted the plate of food I had made. She'd never had a birthday meal before, and the first one she would ever eat was one I had cooked with my own hands. Since she'd already misunderstood, there was no way to explain. I could only sit with her while she ate. Finally, it was time for the cake. She picked up the knife, ready to cut into it, but I stopped her. I took out a lighter and lit each of the candles. Make a wish first, I said. A look of surprise crossed Isabel's face. She glanced at me, muttering, "What a pain," but she put the knife down. She closed her eyes. I wished for Julian to be safe and for his surgery to be successful. She opened them and looked at me, as if gauging my reaction. Seeing the flicker of sadness in my eyes, her own heart seemed to skip a beat. She quickly added, "And I wish for Ethan's surgery to go smoothly, and for him to be healthy." After the small celebration, Isabel was about to leave. But at that moment, the enormous crystal chandelier overhead suddenly broke from its chain and came crashing down. Isabel was standing directly beneath it. If she died, my mission would fail. Without a thought, I lunged forward and tackled her, shoving her out of the way. "Look out!" Crash! The chandelier shattered on the marble floor like a brilliant, deadly firework. And beneath the glittering explosion, I collapsed. In the hazy moments that followed, I thought I saw Isabel, her face twisted in a panic I'd never seen before, rushing toward me. It had to be a hallucination. Isabel would never look at me like that. I don't know how much time passed before I opened my eyes again. The first thing I saw was a white ceiling and the glare of fluorescent lights. I was in a hospital. Isabel was sitting by my bed, and the moment she saw I was awake, her frantic expression vanished, replaced by her usual icy mask. "Are you crazy? Or do you just have a death wish?" My head was pounding, but I wasn't stupid. I knew that without Isabel, there was no chance of bringing Anna back. My voice was unwavering. "Because I love you." Hearing this declaration again, Isabel didn't respond with her usual coldness. Instead, a look of genuine astonishment crossed her face. Because he loved her, he would risk his own life. He would donate his heart. He would do anything. It seemed no one had ever put her first with such unwavering conviction. She thought back over the last 5 years of all the things this man had done for her. It was a list so long, she couldn't even count it all. And what had she done for him? Ordered him around, used him, and hurt him again and again for Julian's sake. And through it all, he had never once complained. A tremor went through Isabel's heart. Just as she was about to say something, the door to the room burst open. "Izzy, quick! It's Julian." He slit his wrists. She shot to her feet, her face instantly filled with alarm. "What happened?" The person who had rushed and explained quickly. "They've stabilized him, but he lost a lot of blood and he's unconscious. He needs an immediate transfusion." The person's eyes darted to me. "Isn't Ethan a match for Julian? We need him to donate blood now." Hearing this, a rare flicker of hesitation crossed Isabel's face. For the first time in 5 years, she was torn between Julian and Ethan. She frowned, a hint of reluctance in her voice. "But Ethan is injured too." The person looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Izzy, are you kidding me? Julian is unconscious, and you're worried about this." This simp. Isabel's face instantly turned to ice. But before she could retort, I had already thrown back the covers and gotten out of bed. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door. Without looking back, I said, "I'm fine." To me, both Julian's and Isabel's lives were far more important than my own. They were the two critical pieces for completing my final mission. My heart was calm, though my head still spun from my injury. I steadied myself against the wall and staggered out of the room. Watching my departing figure, Isabel felt an unexpected pang in her chest, a feeling akin to heartache. Alarmed by her own emotions, she told herself she must be going crazy. She loved Julian. Why would she feel pain for me? No, it wasn't pain, she reasoned. It was guilt. He had just saved her life. It was only natural to feel guilty. Isabel repeated this mantra in her head, trying to calm herself, before following me to the transfusion room. The room was cold. I shivered in my thin hospital gown. Isabel watched as the nurse prepped my arm, her movements a bit rough. Isabel's frown deepened. "Is that how much you need to draw? Is that not enough? Will it have any effect on his health?" I looked up at her and tried to offer some reassurance. "It's fine. It won't affect the surgery." My words seemed to stop her in her tracks. She looked stunned, as if she wanted to explain that wasn't what she meant, but just then the doctor removed the needle and began giving instructions. "Get plenty of rest for the next few days. Eat healthy, avoid spicy and greasy foods, and don't catch a cold." I thanked the doctor, then turned to Isabel. "I'm going back to my room to rest. You should go be with Mr. Croft." With that, I got up and left, not giving her another look. As my back disappeared through the doorway, Isabel was struck by a wave of conflicting emotions. The heavy weight in her chest was back, a suffocating pressure that made it hard to breathe. These were the last few days. I stayed in the hospital, since the surgery was imminent and it was more convenient. Nurses came by periodically to check on me, and from their hushed conversations, I picked up bits and pieces about Isabel and Julian. I heard Ms. Vance has the chief of surgery himself doing all of Mr. Croft's checkups. I've never even seen the chief in person. Please, I saw him practically bowing to her the other day when I was getting in 4. I was so scared I didn't dare to breathe. They say Ms. Vance is an ice queen, but you should see the way she feeds Mr. Croft. She looks like the most gentle, loving wife. I'm so jealous. When will I ever find a man who loves me like that? Whenever I heard these things, I treated them as gossip, something to pass the time. It had nothing to do with me. I didn't need to be envious of them. My Anna was the best woman in the world. Soon, I would see my love again very soon. As the day of my heart transplant surgery approached, I noticed Isabel started acting strangely. She began visiting my room every day, showing a surprising level of concern, even bringing me food she knew I liked. Perhaps she was afraid I'd back out. Or maybe it was guilt. That's why she was being so attentive. But she didn't need to do any of it. I was more invested in this surgery than she was. After being cooped up in my room for days, I felt stuffy and decided to go for a walk. As I reached the stairwell, I heard voices. I wasn't going to eavesdrop, but then I heard my name. I stopped listening. It was Isabel and a few of her friends discussing the surgery. I don't get it, Izzy. Why are you hesitating now? You love Julian more than anything, right? He already tried to kill himself over this. How can you still be on the fence? Isabel was silent for a long time. Finally, as if forcing herself to find a reason, she said coldly, "What if I break my promise to marry him and he backs out of the surgery?" Her friends breathed a collective sigh of relief, then chuckled. "Izzy, relax. You've known Ethan for years. You know him better than anyone. He'd do anything you ask, whether you marry him or not. You can test him if you want. Just tell him the wedding's off. Even if he objects, you can deal with it later. This way you don't have to sacrifice yourself, and you and Julian can finally have a real shot. I'm telling you, Izzy, I've seen the way Julian looks at you lately. It's different. He's definitely falling for you. Yeah, just a little more effort, and you two will finally be together." Despite their reassurances, Isabel's expression remained complicated, hesitant. Seeing her like this, one of her friends seemed to have a sudden realization. "Izzy, wait, you haven't actually fallen for that guy, have you?" The question seemed to pierce through Isabel's proud exterior, snapping her back to reality. Her face turned to stone. Fallen for him? Not in this lifetime. When I heard that, I just shook my head with a small, wry smile. I had no desire to hear any more. I turned and walked away. Not long after I returned to my room, Isabel appeared. I knew exactly why she was here. As expected, she got straight to the point. "You know, Julian attempted suicide. He doesn't want me to sacrifice my own happiness for him to live. He said he'd rather not have the heart at all." She took a breath. "I'm sorry. I can't go through with my promise to marry you, but I can offer you something else as compensation. Name any condition you want. Anything except marrying me." Her words instantly brought Julian's warning back to me. "I'm afraid you're not going to get what you want." This was it. This was how he was stopping her. I felt no great emotional wave, just a quiet understanding. I slowly looked up at Isabel, my expression calm. "Move this surgery up. That's my condition." My answer seemed to stun her. Her eyes widened, her pupils trembling slightly. After a long silence, she asked, bewildered, "Your only condition is to have the surgery sooner? Why?" I nodded, my gaze as placid as a still lake. "Because I want you to see a healthy Mr. Croft as soon as possible. And, of course, because it meant I would see my beloved Anna that much sooner." In the end, we were all just getting what we wanted. As I said it, my eyes filled with what she had always interpreted as pure love, and for the first time, it made her flinch. She had imagined 1,000 possible reactions to her breaking the deal, but this was not one of them. Perhaps if I had been sad, or even cried, she would have felt better. Her brow was now a tight knot. After another long pause, she finally voiced the question that had been plaguing her. "Ethan, why do you love me so much?" Our eyes met, and for a moment, it was as if I could see Anna through her deep, dark pupils. A smile touched my lips, and my voice was firm with a conviction she couldn't possibly understand. "I came to this world just for you." The statement was true, but Isabel heard it as just another one of my dramatic confessions of love. Her long lashes fluttered. She seemed to be thinking for a long time before she added, "After the surgery is over, I'll have a surprise for you." I smiled. Then I pulled out something I had prepared. It was a beautifully wrapped box. Inside was a small audio player containing the recording of Julian's conversation in the restroom. It was my parting gift, a small payback for the slaps and the plunge into the freezing river. "What a coincidence," I said. "I have a gift for you too." Isabel looked surprised and instinctively reached to open it. I gently placed my hand over hers, stopping her. This is my surprise for you. Promise me you'll only open it after my surgery is over. Please. She hesitated, then nodded without asking why. With the surgery so close, she seemed willing to indulge my whims, not sensing the finality in my tone. Okay. Isabel took the box, her expression unreadable. Because of my request, the surgery was moved up. The day came quickly. Dressed in a sterile hospital gown, I was finally wheeled into the operating room. Just before the heavy doors swung shut, I saw Isabel standing alone in the hallway, watching me disappear. As the doors closed, a sudden, sharp pain seized her heart, as if it were being squeezed by an invisible hand. The color drained from her face. In that moment, she felt as if something vital, something irreplaceable in her life, was quietly slipping away. For the first time, a look of genuine panic crossed Isabel's face. She grabbed the arm of a surgeon about to enter the room. The artificial heart. Are you sure there won't be any problems? The technology is very mature now, Ms. Vance. Please rest assured. Mr. Grant will be fine. The doctor's guarantee seemed to bring her back to her senses. She let go, breathing a small sigh of relief. Was I worried about Ethan's safety? What is wrong with me? No, this is a life-or-death operation. It's normal to be worried. Isabel kept repeating these rationalizations to herself, trying to calm the storm inside her. She paced for a long time before finally sinking into a chair in the empty hallway, but the anxious tension on her face remained. Inside the operating room, I stared up at the glaring lights, my heart pounding with excitement. 5 years. I had waited 5 long years for this day. It was all about to end. I was finally going to see my love again. Anna would be resurrected, and we would finally live happily ever after. Soon, the anesthetic flowed into my veins, and I slipped into unconsciousness. The surgery was, in its own way, a success. I heard the familiar, mechanical voice of the system. Congratulations, host. The 100th task is complete. Your wish has been granted. Detaching from this world. The next second, in the cold, sterile operating room, the heart monitor connected to my body erupted in a shrill, piercing alarm. Beep. The piercing alarm cut through the silence of the hallway. Isabel shot up from her chair. A powerful wave of dread washed over her. She clenched her fists, her heart hammering against her ribs, her entire body starting to tremble. What's happening? Is something wrong with Ethan? She lunged toward the operating room doors, but her assistant quickly blocked her path. Ms. Vance, please don't panic. Mr. Grant will be fine. The doctor just said the technology is very reliable. At that moment, Isabel was stunned by her own reaction. When she realized something had gone wrong with the surgery, her first thought wasn't of Julian. It was of Ethan. Don't I love Julian? Why? Why am I so worried about Ethan's safety? Impossible. It was absolutely impossible. She shook her head, convinced her mind was playing tricks on her. How could she be worried about Ethan? He had done so many reckless things over the years and had always been fine. How could he fall to something as routine as a minor surgery? That's right, she told herself. He'll be fine. He has to be. Isabel prayed desperately. It was only then that she belatedly realized that over the past 5 years, he had already given her so much. When Julian left the country with his ex-girlfriend, the blow had been devastating. She had spent her nights drunk, her days in a stupor, and no one could get through to her. It was Ethan who had appeared out of nowhere and pulled her from the mire. Thinking back now, Isabel felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. She remembered their first meeting. She had spat a single cold word at him. Get out. But he hadn't gotten angry. He had just gently comforted her. It's okay. I'm here for you now. I appear in this world for you. The memory was a sharp stab of pain. She hadn't realized until this very moment just how important Ethan had become to her. And his final words before entering the operating room. Now, they sounded like a farewell. Why? Why was this happening? As Isabel's thoughts spiraled, the operating room doors opened. A surgeon, his mask off and his face grim, walked toward her. Her heart sank. Ms. Vance, I'm very sorry. Mr. Grant's body had a severe rejection to the artificial organ. We were unable to revive him. His death has been confirmed. The surgeon paused, his tone shifting to a professional monotone. However, per your specific instructions regarding Mr. Croft's safety, I can assure you that his transplant was a complete success. Isabel just stood there, frozen. The doctor's words were a distant buzz. All she could hear was a single sentence, echoing in her mind. Ethan's death has been confirmed. He was dead. Ethan was dead. How could Ethan be dead? The news hit her like a lightning strike. Her heart stopped, and a searing pain ripped through her. Isabel staggered, nearly collapsing. Her assistant rushed to support her, but the agony had driven Isabel to the edge of madness. She lunged forward, grabbing the doctor by the collar of his scrubs, her eyes blazing like a cornered animal. "What the hell are you talking about? How could Ethan be dead? Say another damn word, and I'll break your legs," she screamed, her voice raw. Tell me Ethan isn't dead. Tell me he's alive and well. Say it now." The doctor remained impassive, his face heavy, allowing her to shake him. "Ms. Vance, please accept my condolences. There is nothing more we could do." Her assistant tried to pull her away. "Ms. Vance, please, you need to calm down." But Isabel had lost all reason. "To hell with your condolences. Get the hell out of my way," she shrieked. "Where is Ethan? Let me through. I need to see him." They had promised her he would be safe. Why did it end like this? If anything happened to Ethan, she would make every single person here pay. No one could stop the frenzied Isabel. She violently shoved the doctor aside and burst into the operating room. The operating room was chillingly cold, the bright lights casting a sterile, ghastly pallor over everything. The doctors and nurses stood by, stunned by the intrusion. They hadn't expected the surgery to fail, but such were the risks of life-or-death medicine. No one could guarantee a 100% success rate. What shocked them even more was the sheer violence of Ms. Vance's grief over Ethan Grant's death. Wasn't Mr. Croft supposed to be the love of her life? Yet, as she stormed into the room, she didn't even glance in his direction. Isabel's eyes were fixed on the surgical table, on the still form covered by a white sheet. She walked toward it, each step heavy leaden. She had never imagined that this would be how she would see Ethan again. With trembling hands, Isabel slowly lifted the sheet. Ethan's face was peaceful, his body still. When had he become so thin? She remembered the first time she saw him, so full of life and spirit. He had a beautiful smile with 2 small dimples. A powerful sense of suffocation seized her. Staring at his serene face, a single thought echoed relentlessly in her mind. Ethan is dead. Ethan is really dead. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. She felt like she was choking. Suddenly, she clutched her chest and retched, a spray of blood splattering on the pristine floor. Then, her world went black and she collapsed. When Isabel regained consciousness, it was night. She was still in a hospital, and dripping into her arm. The room was silent. She sat up abruptly, calling for her assistant. "Ethan, where is he? I need to see him." "Ms. Vance, you're awake." The assistant rushed in, her expression pained and helpless. "Ms. Vance, for your own health, please. You have to accept it. Mr. Grant is really—" "Don't you dare say it." Isabel cut her off harshly. She tried to get out of bed, but her assistant blocked her way. "Ms. Vance, it's true. Please, you have to face reality. People die, and they don't come back." The assistant pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. "What is wrong with you? You knew this surgery had risks. And Mr. Croft is safe, isn't he? That's a good outcome." The assistant's words seemed to finally break through. Isabel froze. Yes, the surgery was risky. And even if Ethan had survived, he would have lived a life tethered to a machine in constant agony. Was it the doctor's fault? No. It was all my fault. I was the one who demanded he donate his heart. I was the one who promised to marry him, then broke that promise. I caused all of this. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Isabel sank back onto the bed, her body limp. A single, crystalline tear escaped the corner of her eye, followed by another and another, until they were streaming down her face like a broken dam. Her stunned assistant moved to comfort her, but Isabel was already lost, her eyes vacant, muttering the same phrase over and over again. "I killed Ethan. I killed Ethan." It wasn't the doctors who should pay for his death. It was me. She felt as if her soul had been ripped out, leaving an empty shell. She was trapped in a waking nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, a thought surfaced through the fog of her grief. The gift Ethan had given her before the surgery. His surprise. The thought was a flicker of light in her darkness. Her eyes regained a sliver of focus. She began to search frantically for the box. Isabel stared at the beautifully wrapped box, her hands trembling as she tore it open. Inside, she found something unexpected, a small, sleek audio recorder. Her heart began to pound. Had Ethan known he was going to die? Was this his final message to her? A wave of grief washed over her. Taking a deep, shuddering breath to steady herself, Isabel finally pressed the play button. Damn dude, Ms. Vance is something else. Dropping that kind of cash on a gift just like that. You've probably made a couple million off her in the last few weeks alone. Julian, I gotta say, that whole thing with your ex, wasn't that a bit much? Even a heart of stone should have melted by now, man. You gonna give her a break? Yeah, seriously. The woman is rich and completely lovesick. Don't tell me you're really just gonna keep calling her your sister. You guys don't actually think I see her as a sister, do you? Let me teach you something. People always want what they can't have. It's the most precious thing in the world to them. Otherwise, why would she be so completely devoted to me? Let's be honest, keeping things like this is way more fun than actually being with her. A woman that emotionally starved is pathetically easy to control. Jesus, Julian, you're a master at this. But what's the point? It's like having a priceless vase you can only look at, not touch. You idiot. He is treating her like a vase. No, better. A personal ATM. Ha ha ha. Still, I heard Vance promised to marry that simp if he donated his heart. Don't worry, I won't let that happen. And as for that simp, I don't even think about him. Earlier, I slapped myself 3 times, and what did Izzy do? Made her guys hit him 30 times without even asking a question. A few minutes ago, I tossed that bracelet in the river, and you all saw what happened to him. If I want to mess with him, I got 100 different ways. Anyway, forget all that. You guys see those girls at the party tonight? I already got their numbers. We're all heading to a hotel after this. You and Julian? Of course. Isabel couldn't believe it. The recording was of Julian. His voice, once so dear to her, now sounded utterly alien. She played it again, and again, and again. She gripped the small device so tightly her knuckles turned white, as if she could crush it into dust. So this was the real Julian. Everything he did was a calculated move to keep her devoted to him. How ridiculous. How utterly laughable. He toyed with her emotions, her love, without a single thought for her feelings. Didn't he know her love for him was already enough to last a lifetime? No, he knew. This was just who he was. In his eyes, she wasn't important. Only the game of conquest mattered. Listening to the recording, Isabel finally understood everything. A broken, hysterical laugh escaped her lips, a sound of pure self-mockery. She remembered how she had, without question, ordered her bodyguards to beat a weakened Ethan. How she had kicked him into the freezing river and left him there for hours. What kind of monster does something like that? I'm a monster, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm a monster. I'm a murderer. Isabel completely broke down. She began smashing her fist against the pristine white wall next to her bed, over and over, venting the fury and regret that consumed her. Soon, her knuckles were bloody, staining the wall red, but she didn't feel the pain. She was numb. She regretted everything. If she could only go back, she would never let this tragedy happen. But there were no second chances in this world. Back at the penthouse, Isabel moved like a ghost. It wasn't until she saw Maria, the housekeeper, packing up Ethan's few belongings that she snapped back to life. What are you doing? Who told you to touch his things? She demanded, her voice raw with rage. Maria jumped, startled by Isabel's fury. She quickly put down the box. It was Mr. Croft, ma'am. He said it was bad luck to keep a dead person's things around and told me to clear them out. Hearing his name, Isabel's gaze turned arctic. When did he become the master of this house? Her voice was dangerously low. Listen to me. No one is to touch any of Ethan's things. Do you understand? Maria nodded quickly. As she turned to leave, she muttered under her breath, just loud enough to be heard. Poor Mr. Grant. You were too good. A person like that wasn't worth what you gave. What did you say? Isabel's eyes were sharp as knives. She remembered that this housekeeper had been fond of Ethan. Normally, if anyone had dared to criticize her to her face, they would have been fired on the spot. But the thought that Maria was one of the last people connected to Ethan made her hesitate. She felt an unfamiliar reluctance to let her go. Then tell me, Isabel said, her voice surprisingly steady. How is he wasting his efforts on someone who wasn't worth it? Maria looked stunned that the famously aloof Ms. Vance was actually engaging her in conversation. But she was already on her way out, so she decided she had nothing left to lose. She took a deep breath. Ms. Vance, I've worked in this house for almost 10 years. I've practically watched you grow up. I've seen many men try to win your affection, including Mr. Croft. And in my opinion, he's no different from the rest of them. She glanced cautiously at Isabel, who remained silent, her expression unreadable. Maria took this as a sign to continue. None of those men could ever compare to Mr. Grant. They all wanted something from you. Your looks, your money, your power. But Mr. Grant, he wanted nothing. He truly, genuinely loved you. Isabel's brow furrowed, but she gestured for Maria to go on. I know you've always loved Mr. Croft. You grew up together. But he was never as good to you as Mr. Grant was. You grew up together, but he was never as good to you as Mr. Grant was. He never truly cared about you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have just left you to go abroad with another woman. I remember how you were back then. You drank every night, smashed everything in the house. Sometimes you even got violent. None of the staff dared to go near you. Only Mr. Grant. He wasn't afraid. He stayed by your side, took care of you, and asked for nothing in return. Do you think he wasn't scared? He just didn't want to see you hurting, Ms. Vance. In all these years, was there anything you asked of him that he didn't do? You said you wanted a certain pastry, and he'd stay up all night to bake it for you. You said the flowers in the garden were ugly, so he replanted them all himself. Honestly, even an old woman like me was moved by his devotion. But you were like a fortress of ice. I remember you said you would marry him if he donated his heart. I thought, well, he'll have an artificial heart, but at least he'll be with the woman he loves. It will be a happy ending. But then, you even broke that final promise to him. Maria's voice was filled with a deep, sorrowful pity. In the end, Mr. Grant got nothing. He lost his life for it. She sighed heavily. Now that he's gone, I suppose none of this matters. That boy was just too kind, too foolish. My heart aches for him. He was a pitiable soul. Ms. Vance, I don't mean to overstep. Mr. Grant never asked me to say any of this. It's just, I saw how he was these past few years, and I know I always took his side. Maria picked up her bag. I know you will be with Mr. Croft, and I wish you all the best. But he won't want me around, so I've decided it's time for me to leave today. With that, Maria turned to go. Isabel remained silent, lost in a sea of memories. After a long moment, she let out a soft sigh. I won't be with him. You can stay if you wish. Maria stopped, thinking she must have misheard. What did you say, ma'am? Isabel repeated her words, her voice clear and firm. I will not be with Julian Croft. Maria stared at her, saw the unshakable resolve in her eyes, and finally understood. It's good that you see the truth now, Ms. Vance. She then left, leaving Isabel alone in the vast, empty penthouse. Isabel looked up the stairs, toward the room that was supposed to have been Ethan's after they married. In reality, he had hardly spent any time there. He owned so few things that his presence barely left a mark. Her heart aching, she walked up to the room. The simple, sparse furnishings felt like a punch to the gut. She sat on the edge of the bed, gently running her hand over the crisp, cool sheets, as if she could feel the last traces of his warmth. Her mind drifted back, replaying the last 5 years, a montage of countless small moments. They had spent so much time together, so long that he had become an indispensable part of her life. She had been a fool, a blind, selfish fool, and now she finally realized it. But it was too late. She had lost him forever. For the next few days, Isabel locked herself in that room. She didn't set foot outside, didn't see a soul. The person most frantic about this, of course, was Julian. Since the surgery, he hadn't seen her once. Isabel hadn't even visited him in the hospital. He started to panic. Before, if he'd so much as lost his appetite, she would have rushed to cook for him herself. Now, he just had major surgery, and she had vanished. What had happened? Where had things gone wrong? Julian grew increasingly anxious, wondering if she had somehow found out the truth. But no, she loved him too much. She had loved him for years. A few sweet words, and she would forgive him just like she always did. With this thought, Julian managed to calm himself down. The situation was unsettling, but he was certain of one thing. Isabel's love for him was absolute. That was all that mattered. Everything was salvageable. Dragging his still weak body, Julian left the hospital and went straight to the Vance penthouse. Despite his attempts to reassure himself, Isabel's behavior was so abnormal that Julian couldn't shake his unease. When the car stopped at the penthouse, he rushed inside, ignoring the staff, his face a mask of anxiety. Izzy, he called out, his voice echoing in the grand foyer. Izzy, are you here? Where are you? Why aren't you answering my calls? Why haven't you come to see me? He shouted for a while before a bodyguard finally directed him to the room that had once belonged to Ethan. The thought of that simp, Ethan, sent an unfamiliar jolt of fear through him. He knocked on the door, but there was no response. What was wrong with Isabel? She was supposed to love him. How dare she ignore him like this? His patience wearing thin, Julian began to pound on the door, his voice laced with irritation. Open the door. I know you're in there. Why are you hiding from me? You're not blaming me for Ethan's death, are you? It was an accident. I know you're upset that he died, but it wasn't my fault. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't the doctor's fault. If you have to blame someone, blame his bad luck. Before he could finish his rant, the door was flung open with a violent bang. They stood face to face. In Isabel's eyes, Julian saw a coldness so profound it seemed to freeze the air around them. It was a coldness that concealed a raging fire. Her face was terrifyingly grim. "Enough," she hissed. Julian froze. He had never heard her speak to him with such severity. Her tone was laced with ice and finality. She looked at him as if he were a complete stranger. He was truly panicked now. He reached for her hand, but she slapped it away with a force that sent his hand crashing into the doorframe. He winced in pain, the last of his composure shattering. His own face hardened. "What is your problem? You're actually angry at me? For a simp? For an outsider? Isabel, don't tell me you've actually fallen in love with Ethan Grant." Isabel froze, her eyes losing focus as she fell into a trance. The question echoed in her mind. "You haven't actually fallen for Ethan Grant, have you? Do I love him? Maybe. But when did it happen? Was it in his relentless devotion, his constant companionship, or when he sacrificed his dignity for her? Perhaps she had loved him for a long time. She just hadn't been willing or brave enough to admit it. But now, she could finally say the words with courage and conviction. She looked up, her gaze locking onto Julian's. "I do love him." Julian looked as if he had just been told the funniest joke in the world. He tried to laugh, but no sound came out. He was furious, incredulous. He could only sputter in rebuttal. "Are you kidding me? How could you fall for that guy? Izzy, you're supposed to love me." He lunged forward to embrace her, but she was faster, shoving him back with brutal force. "Stop it. You know what you did. Don't make this any uglier than it already is. I don't want to see you ever again." Julian was dumbfounded, his eyes filled with tears, his voice breaking. "Izzy, what do you mean? I don't understand." Isabel's face was a cold mask. She said nothing, just pulled out the audio recorder and pressed play. Hearing his own voice fill the room, Julian's blood ran cold. He lunged for the device, trying to snatch it away. "Izzy, listen to me. It's not what it sounds like. It's all a misunderstanding," he babbled. But Isabel had no intention of wasting any more time. With a heavy thud, the door slammed shut in his face, leaving him standing alone in the hallway, his world crumbling around him. Julian stared at the closed door, utterly broken. He began to pound on it like a madman, his cries hysterical. "This can't be happening. You're lying, aren't you? Tell me this is all a lie. You're just trying to scare me. Izzy, you're supposed to love me. How could you love him?" Realizing his anger was getting him nowhere, he quickly changed his tune, his voice turning pleading. "Izzy, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. I know I shouldn't have lied to you. Those were just stupid things I said to my friends to sound cool. Please, just give me one more chance." "Wait, Izzy, you've always loved me, right? Let's be together. For real this time." He was desperate. In all his years, he had never been this afraid, because he knew that this time, Isabel was truly, irrevocably angry. No matter what he had done in the past, she had never reacted like this. As evening fell, Julian continued to beg, but Isabel remained silent, her heart made of stone. She was a woman of extremes. When she loved, she would raise you to the heavens. When she didn't, she would crush you under her heel. Finally, exhausted and defeated, Julian left. Inside the room, Isabel felt as if she were suffocating. It was only now, in the silence, that she truly understood how deeply she had come to love Ethan. If only she could do it all over again. She would never let this happen. She would treat him right. She would spend her life making it up to him. But it was no use. People are like that. You only learn to cherish something after you've lost it. Isabel stared blankly into space, remembering what Ethan had once told her. "I came to this world just for you." But now he was gone from her world, and she had lost all will to live. Looking out the window at the gloomy sky, a thought began to form in her mind, a desire to jump, to end it all. Isabel hadn't eaten in 3 days. Her consciousness was starting to fray. A voice in her head whispered that if she just jumped, she could see her beloved Ethan again. In a daze, her movements stiff and robotic, she opened the window and climbed onto the ledge. The cold wind whipped around her, sending her long hair flying. Isabel closed her eyes. But just as she was about to leap, a new voice echoed in her mind, a flat, mechanical tone. "Congratulations, host. You have successfully bound to the mission system. Mission deploying." Isabel's eyes snapped open. She scanned the empty room, thinking she was hallucinating. "Mission reward. Remain in Ethan Grant's world." The voice sounded again. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. A system? A mission? Remain in Ethan's world? A spark of life returned to Isabel's eyes. Could it be? Was Ethan not dead after all, but simply in another world? A wild hope surged through her. "What's the mission?" she asked aloud. The voice replied instantly. "Within 5 years, you must make Ethan Grant fall in love with you. Warning, if you fail the mission, you will lose everything." Isabel felt a surge of euphoric joy. Ethan loved her so much he was willing to die for her. Making him fall in love with her would be easy, wouldn't it? She couldn't believe it. Fate was actually giving her a second chance. Without a shred of hesitation, she accepted. Fine, I agree. As for the penalty for failure, she didn't care. What was the point of living, of having all the money in the world, without Ethan by her side? The moment she agreed, a blinding white light filled her vision, and she lost consciousness. We interrupt this program with breaking news. Julian Croft, recipient of the city's first heart transplant, has died following sudden cardiac failure. Mr. Croft's tragic passing marks the failure of this landmark medical procedure. The exact cause is currently under investigation. In other news, we have a tragic update from the Upper East Side. Isabel Vance, CEO of the Vance Corporation, was found deceased in her penthouse last night. The medical examiner has ruled her death a suicide. Sources close to the family suggest Ms. Vance took her own life out of grief for her late boyfriend, Ethan Grant, whose own death was linked to the transplant case. In an exclusive interview, the Vance family's longtime housekeeper told reporters that Ms. Vance could not bear the loss of Mr. Grant, a tragic end to a story of love and loss that has captivated the city. Reporting live from New York, this is the Morning News. Yendi.